Gentleman yields back. The chair recognizes himself for 5 minutes. Mr. Dubowitz, the administration has stated that all sanctions relief is from the nuclear sanctions regime only. And after reviewing the list of entities and individuals de-designated, which I think you referred to in your opening statement, I think that was the list you referred to, and if it was, we want to include it as part of the record. My question to you is, do you agree with the administration's statement?
Well, as I mentioned earlier, Mr. Chairman, the administration is taking non-nuclear sanctions and recharacterizing them as nuclear sanctions. So if, on that basis, I don't agree with the administration. There were sanctions put in place that were not related to Iran's nuclear program. They're related to Iran's ballistic missile program, its money laundering, its illicit financial activities. And if you look at the Central Bank of Iran, which to me is the classic example of this, and there are other examples, but the Central Bank of Iran was designated, legislatively designated, and designated by the administration, and there was a finding under Section 311 of the Patriot Act, and there were numerous Treasury statements to confirm this. It was engaged in a range of illicit financial activities: nuclear, ballistic missile, terrorism, money laundering, sanctions evasion. And yet the administration is essentially allowing the Central Bank of Iran back in the global financial system. I disagree with Mr. Nephew. There are other ways to negotiate this. There are ways to actually allow the CBI back partially. There are ways to actually put down specific benchmarks and say to the Iranians, once you have established and met those benchmarks, then we will rehabilitate your Central Bank of Iran, but we are not going to wipe away all of these illicit financial activities just because we have a nuclear agreement. That could have been proposed and won in a negotiation. It is not good enough to say that the Iranians would have rejected it and therefore we took it off the table.
Why do you think that's happening?
I don't want to speculate in what's in the minds of the negotiators, and I have a lot of respect for the men and women who've put a lot of years of their life into this, including Mr. Nephew. But I do think that we went into these negotiations, and I believe that the fundamental precept on the sanctions side was that we can sweep away these sanctions, but we will reinstate them if we have to. And that's the construct. The construct is we'll take them away and then we'll reimpose them if we need to. Instead of saying, how are we going to defend the sanctions architecture in key ways so that we maintain the economic leverage, particularly on the full range of Iran's illicit financial activities, and have said to the Iranians, we'll give you relief here, but we're not giving you relief there until you establish that your banks are no longer engaged in the full range of illicit financial activities. That could have been a separate construct. I think we could have defended that. I think we would have had international support for that. But at the end of the day, the administration had a very different construct. Take it all away and reimpose it if they cheat.
My concern is that some of those de-designations may affect the rights of American citizens who have judgments against Iran. And Mr. Perlis and I, right, in my first round of questioning, we talked about the Beirut barracks bombing case that I believe you were involved in. We spoke off the record before the hearing about after September 11th, the district that I represent, Bucks County, Pennsylvania, had too many families who lost a loved one in the towers and in other places around the country. Fiona Havlish was a lead plaintiff in a case. I think Ellen Saraceni was involved in the case against the Islamic Republic of Iran. They did receive a judgment in excess of $1 billion, which is yet uncollected. I saw a congressional research list of total awards against Iran, and this, excluding punitive damages, just compensatory damages, exceeds $20 billion and doesn't even include the Havlish case from my district. So what message are we sending to, and I completely associate myself with the remarks of Mr. Green earlier about the 4 individuals who are hostage today in Iran, and we speak their names on the floor of the House, and we don't forget them, and we continue to work for them. But what message are we sending to the individuals that have claims and judgments uncollected against the Republic? Might those claims be wiped out as part of this agreement? Any of you?
As counsel for many of the claimants, and I spoke earlier with you off the record. We share an enforcement activity with the Havlish plaintiffs and the Justice Department in New York. The target of that enforcement activity was a skyscraper, 650 Fifth Avenue in Manhattan, that Iran was using as a money laundering facility. We sit at the knife's edge today, not knowing what the impact of this agreement will be on all of those enforcement activities. We don't know what instruction the administration will give to the Justice Department with respect to this joint seizure that we've done with the Havlish plaintiffs. We're simply stuck in stasis in this wait-and-see attitude. What we do know is, at least in the case of this bookkeeping entry system that we touched upon earlier, which is really the world's largest Hawala banking system. That's all it is at the end of the day, is the world's largest Hawala banking system. Federal judge in Manhattan last year asked OFAC to comment on the lawfulness of this Hawala system. This is Clearstream SA, a Luxembourg company owned by Deutsche Börse, running we tracked, I have no idea how much money really went through the account. We were able to track $1.67 billion of Iranian money going in and out of JP Morgan Chase by this bookkeeping system. And OFAC, frankly, declined to opine upon the lawfulness of that sort of transaction. From a practitioner's perspective, that's very frightening, because if a Clearstream can move Iranian money in and out of New York by book entry without it being a violation of law, the entire sanctions regime, and I'm not talking about Iranian sanctions, I'm talking about sanctions across the board, collapses. It means that any drug cartel, for example, could move their money to Luxembourg in a Gulf Stream and have a Luxembourg-based bank move it into the U.S. system by book entry. It's unreportable and untraceable.
Mr. Perlis, that skyscraper to which you refer on Fifth Avenue in Manhattan, New York City,
yes,
I believe is owned by Asa Corporation, which is
correct.
Alleged to be a shell corporation controlled by Iranians.
That's correct.
My concern is Asa Corporation is on the list of organizations to be de-designated, which goes back to Mr. Dubowitz's concern. What does this have to do with nuclear sanctions, and what is really happening here, and what is the impact? But perhaps a subject for another hearing.
Mr. Chairman, if I could just add one quick thought. I mean, Mr. Nephew said we were going to give $100 billion of Iran's money back to Iran. It's interesting. I wonder if U.S. negotiators, maybe you could ask Secretary Kerry this, did they ever say to the Iranians, of the $100 billion that we're going to give you back, we're going to take X percent, and we're going to use that to satisfy the claims for the judgments of Iranian victims of terrorism. So before we give you money back so you can use it to create future victims of Iranian terrorism, you're going to pay those judgments out of that money. And we're going to give you, for every dollar that we give you, for every dollar that we take, we're going to give 80 cents back to you and 20 cents back to the victims of Iranian terrorism. Would have been an easy way to have settled this issue.
My time is well expired, and the Vice Chairman of the committee is recognized for the final question.